Greetings and welcome to Star Trek Discovery Pod, a sometimes funny, trying to be smart podcast covering all things new in classic Trek. Are you ready to join for an oil bath? I am your captain, Myrriah Gossett. With me on the view screen, we have
Clyde Haynes. Myrriah, look, if there's a shiny box with a glowing door and you step through it, I'm sitting in the big chair. Just let you know.
Sit in that big chair. Unfortunately, Paul had an emergency away mission, so he will not be joining us tonight. He might try to pop in here at the back half, depending on when he finishes up. But tonight we are talking about the penultimate episode of Star Trek Discovery.
Didn't feel that way.
The whole shebang.
Just didn't feel like it was the penultimate.
It felt like a great seasonal penultimate, but we're going to get into it. But before that, we are talking about Lagrange Point, which was directed by none other than Jonathan Frakes, written by Sean Cochran and Ari Friedman. And just a couple of reminders before we dig on in. You can subscribe to the podcast, which is super helpful for us. You can follow it on other apps. You can also leave us reviews on Apple and Spotify. You can hit that subscribe link on YouTube. You can find links to everywhere. We have content at StarTrekPod.co. And if you want to hang out with us over in the Slack channel, we've been sharing funny Trek TikToks today that started in our Trek's Odds and End channel. We've got videos of a potential music number happening from the Strange New Worlds crew in there. I've been sharing silly TikToks about Spock listening to Chapel Roan songs. It's a good time. You can join us at patreon.com/Star Trek Pod. Clyde, if people are hanging out with us tonight during the live stream, how should they get our attention, interact, ask us a question? What's the way to show us that you need attention in the chat?
You know, this is where I like to say something witty and fun and some old-timey technology, but I'm just going to say type capital P, capital O, capital T, capital pod in the chat, and we'll take a look at your comment, your thought, your question. And in a moment, when we think about, hey, what was your overall reaction to the entire show? Just type capital H, capital F, capital HF in the chat. We'll take a look at your musing, your overall summary, your theoretical interjection of what you think the show was all about, and we'll take a look at that.
Take a look. And in honor of Paul not being here tonight, I think it is time for some Hot Freaks!
Hot Freaks! It's like he's still with us.
It's like he's still here. A little hot Paul moment. What did you think about this episode, Clyde?
You know what? I liked it. It moved. I had a couple nits to pick. Like, again, I'm like, you got the captain going on a away mission into a ship to capture something. And I was just thinking the whole time, you're a xenobiologist. What exactly about this mission requires your special like skills? But okay, you're Kirk and you're going to go on every away mission. I'm just going to let it go.
Yeah, I mean, in classic, like Janeway is usually also hanging out there, going on Borg ships.
Yeah, but ultimately, I thought it was a fun ride. Like, I thought it was interesting. I think about halfway through, I was like, oh yeah, they're definitely not going to wrap up whatever's going on in this mission. It's just we're taking a little long to get there. I was frustrated about one thing though. It seemed like there was a lot of like for the urgency that was involved in this show. It felt like they did a lot of stopping and talking and explaining. And
yeah,
there were times I was just like, are you seriously, like, what are you doing? Like, why are we having all these conversations? So when I think I'm not sure who said it was like big problem, less like skip the science, just give me the solution. I was like, you guys should be talking like that all the time.
Yeah, I think I had some trouble with the pacing of this episode. I agree. Overall, I had a good time. I think Frakes does action sequences really well, does fight sequences really well. There's lots of elements I really enjoyed in this episode. I also thought, like, kudos to, I know this was Ari Friedman's first script that's ever been, I think, fully televised, which is very exciting. And I thought I enjoyed the humor bits, and I feel like we've talked about that a lot this season, is I think they're really landing some of those lighter moments very well, and I thought this was executed in that way as well. And we'll kind of talk about some of my favorite moments. Olatunde is directing the final episode, should be asked. And who's great. I think does incredible movement with camera. So I'm stoked. Messages from the menagerie. This is another perk. If you're one of our patrons, you can give us your hot freak here at the top. So we have Carmen who said, I'm disappointed with this episode. This is penultimate, and I feel like the storyline didn't really move. I also disliked the in Breen helmet shots. I do love that Adira gets more screen time and that Rainer final takes the chair. Maybe I'll like it more on second watch. Takako said quite a few things. I'm just going to grab a couple of them. Wondering how they're going to solve the problem and conclude the story in a series in a satisfactory way. I love the tension on the Breen ship when the disco team infiltrates. Also the humor relief moments, book, and the oil bath. General Reese for Captain, please, maybe security officer first.
Yeah.
Tilly Rayner combo was hilarious. Agreed. Kim says, I'm pumped for the finale. I really enjoyed Rayner's arc this season. I'm bummed we won't have another season with him. We better get Owo and Detwer back along with Saru and Tarina's wedding next week. And Karen says, okay, well, that definitely was a part one. I just wanted it all. It's really hard to judge. One thing I do love is Tilly and Rayner together. Yeah, I agree. I think let's start there because I think the Tilly and Rayner relation reminds me so much of Tilly and Giorgio, where you have that like the grumpy Gus and like the perpetual optimism. And I just think they're a fun duo. I think it's like it's a good example of when you have characters that are so opposite of each other, but you have to make them work together. And I think it creates pieces of gold.
Yeah, I loved it. And what I liked more about it was when Rainer told her, I'd like you to be my acting number one.
Mhm.
And like it kind of works. Like I wasn't sure about it at first, but I think we originally liked the idea of their interaction. But him in the seat and her next to him, it just kind of works, right? There's a certain balance there that I think is pretty incredible. So
Yeah.
yeah, I like that.
I agree. I think they're great tete-a-tete, if you
I
will.
I can tell you what I don't like, and that's Asha and Jameson. And I think if we had Oo and Detmer, then the ship
Yeah.
would be in better shape. Right?
I think they would have nabbed that thing quicker, but maybe that's why we can't have them right now. But
I felt bad
I
that I thought, like in the show, I was thinking Detmer would have done that so much better.
it's hard because we've learned to love them. And it's like, that's one of the things where you can really tell they did not know this was going to be their last season. Because I think I'm all for adding additional characters. I honestly think the actors they're doing a great job. I know we keep like kind of harping on
Sure.
the fact not Oo and Detmer. But I want to say, I think they're doing a great job. I'm so happy they're a part of our Star Trek family, but I am missing a part of our Star Trek family and the one that we've kind of known and loved for the last 5 seasons. So it's hard to see that go. I feel like that like we were sitting there doing so much scientific, like, ooh, how should we grab this? And then that dreadnought just came in and went mine. And I was like, that was
That drove me nuts. Like it, you were told they're gonna be there in 15 minutes. Like they're like you're not even there, and they're probably gonna beat you. And you get there and you're like, oh my goodness, it's so pretty. Like I don't know, and man, what should we do? What do you guys think? And just like that was I was like,
yeah.
what? What's
Like, I know you
happening here?
figure out how to approach to an actual Lagrange point, which is this actual scientific term for that when there are those gravitational fields between two places. It's similar. NASA uses it a lot. Like there's a gravitational well, sort of where the sun, I don't know if well is the right gravitational force between like the sun and the earth, which creates this like interesting attraction and repulsion space. And they use it as like parking spots in space. So when we like it's like minimal fuel consumption. So it's like a place where you can just kind of go and like hang out, which is really cool to know that that was like, I don't know, like I love when it's based in real science. I think it's really
Hmm.
exciting.
Me too.
Um, But yeah, like I understand, like because it's in this place, you can't just be like fly the ship on in there because you'll be right back into that like space where I don't know if you know much about. I think I've mentioned a few times. I feel like this season goes pairs really well with the book I've been reading all season from Hawking's, and it's like if you get to a certain point of a black hole, it's like you just stretch. Anyway, it's like a wild description, and so
Hmm?
listening to that being like, "Oh, we're on that edge," I'm like, "Oh no, the ship's just gonna stretch and then fall into the black hole." Like, um, yeah, it's pretty wild. So, it's like, I get they had to figure that out, but I don't know if it's because that ship is so big and so powerful that they're able to just, like, jump on in there and grab it.
Well, but if you just hit it with the tractor beam, maybe it worked or maybe it didn't. But
Yeah.
you were sitting around discussing it, and somebody came in and stole your cornbread. Like, just saying, like that.
Welcome back to food talk
Yeah,
to food chat.
that made them look very like just immature, like rookies. I was like, man, they just took it,
Yeah.
right? The only thing that's
I
interesting is they took it and stayed. They should have taken it and left.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they're like, maybe there's something we need here. I don't know. It's like you haven't solved the clue yet, right? Um, I did like too that Tilly mentioned and kind of implied that the progenitor's tech may have even been responsible for creating those black holes, which is interesting now that we've created another portal. Like
Mhm.
perhaps an additional black hole will show up next week, which could be an interesting addition to all of the puzzles they already have to solve. I wanted to jump to Saru and Tarina. I've missed Saru so much. Um, him and Serena though are great, like bringing the flowers from your away mission. I love a classic walk and talk down the start, like through headquarters. It's just like it feels correct. I don't know what it is about a walk and talk through a hallway on Star Trek that just feels like I'm home, but it does.
I mean, I'm a big fan of a walk and talk in anything. I'm also aware that, like, logistically, there's a degree of difficulty that is difficult to pull off. That is not a rookie director cinematographer move. Like
Oh, classic Frakes.
it is, but it's like it's flexing a little bit of his ability.
Yeah. You're like, I see you,
For
West Wing. I see you, Star Trek. We're going to do some walk and
exactly, he's
talks.
like Tommy Salami. I'm not scared of you. Uh, but Tarina is flat out amazing. The look, and kudos to Frakes for capturing it. But when Saru volunteers, the look on her face, like I was like, oh, I mean, she didn't have to say anything. She didn't say anything for a long time, but you knew where her head was at, right? And that's the beauty of it. You thought you knew where her head was at, and then when she explained it to you, I was like, now that is a true relationship. You see something, you think you know it, and then when they actually say, well, here's what I was actually thinking, you're like, oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
you're
that's a
right.
little more nuanced than I thought. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so she's just amazing all around. I did not know we were gonna get with them two. I had no idea their chemistry was gonna be that good.
It's great, and especially because like, they both come off as fairly reserved characters, right? But it's like their emotional intimacy with each other is just, like, off it's like, it's so palpable even in, like, all of the nuances of these performances.
How many people are gonna go around touching somebody's chin now? Like, it's gonna be a whole Star Trek thing. Like, it's gonna be a whole thing.
Yeah, I am like, if I don't get the cutest frickin' wedding next episode, I'm gonna be very sad.
It, that's my struggle. Is the wedding could be a whole episode.
It could, I mean, it's a classic way to end a season, a show, like, is the wedding. And so, and you're right, it could be the whole thing, but we obviously have to get through a lot of stuff next week. Um, I did like the round table Ocean's 11 planning of how to get on the ship with Burnham.
Yeah,
I thought
yeah.
it was like I mean, I know you and I love the team up. I love a heisty movie. I loved this felt like the beginning of a heist movie. It also gave me that like Voyager Ready Room vibes where it is like everyone's around and they're coming up with the plan to infiltrate the Borg ship. Or like the Enterprise incident. I feel like this season has for me hit a lot of great notes of doing small head nods to Trek of past, but without being stuck to like we have to be the Trek of past. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's found its footing, right? It's found its footing in this idea that we're part of this Trek family, but we've got our own way to move. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
totally. And yeah, and to me, like this episode in particular really hit a lot of familiar notes for me from like Voyager episodes of past, specifically with like interactions with the Borg. The one thing I will say that to me felt and like, listen, I think Jonathan Frakes is an incredible television director, but there was a couple of moments for me that felt like a step back in what I have seen in direction on the show, and it's when we did the split screen helmet cams. It just felt
Yeah.
a little dated to me.
It it didn't bother me, but it introduced something that I thought was a little weird, right? And that
Yeah.
is, wait, you can talk to each other and you can talk to the ship,
Mhm.
but
They
nobody
can't hear you
knows.
in the helmet.
They can't hear. They don't hear anything. Like the helmet is soundproof. Like they don't hear anything. And then I'm not saying you switch or do anything when you're ready to talk to somebody outside. Like
Right.
it just there was a lot of like, hey, pay no attention to the Trek science. Just go with it. And I was like, okay,
Yeah. Chupi also
yeah,
brings up a good point of so one of the things that did, and I thought it was funny they even called it out in episode, is when Michael and Book kind of have their heart to heart and realize that they both kind of messed up the relationship for the same reasons because they were scared of failing each other, right? Um, And Chippy says, it's really too bad Michael didn't just grab Book as they left the round table for that tete-a-tete since they were going into a very dangerous mission. Book had just pointed out was crazy. I agree. And it was like, that was one of the things that bugged me the most was like, you're having this super intimate conversation and you can't even see each other's faces. And I was like, I thought it was funny when Burnham was like, "I know this isn't the best time, but," and I was like, "No, it's not the best time." Yeah, I agree. You could have done this while y'all were getting your super suits ready or something, or like getting
it,
dressed together. It just like I get where that conversation 100% needed to happen in this episode, but I do think it was put in the wrong spot.
I had the same thought, but I also thought, well, if I go with the idea that one of you might die, and this may be the last calm moment before. This is barely calm because you're on a ship with enemies walking around. At any moment, they're going to see two brain talking lovingly at each other and think, that doesn't look right.
Well, the brains seem to be into many kinds of relationships, so maybe it wouldn't
Yes.
have been that weird for them.
Hey, you want me to save you a seat in the oil bath? Come on. Like, I mean, it
Come
might not have
on.
been weird, but yeah, it was an odd choice to have that conversation there. But again, that's another element when you talk about pacing of like, hey, I know we're in the middle of this like big heist. Like, to your point, Ocean's 11 is probably going to be considered one of that even franchise as a whole is going to be considered one of the best heist movies in cinematic history. If someone in the middle of that heist stopped and had a heart to heart that wasn't a part of the heist, it would have felt really weird.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like sometimes I get when you need to slow paces down, but that I think it's different when you're pacing out a movie versus a television show, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, I agree. It was a hard like pause for a moment and I think to me my biggest thing was that you couldn't have them I think especially coming off of last episode and getting to see that huge emotional vulnerability from Burnham in front of, mind melded or not mind melded, Mindscape book, and how beautiful that interaction was. And then
Mhm.
like not getting, I wanted it to be a reflection of that. Like to me, it should have been like them actually connecting in the way that Burnham connected in the Mindscape. And I think it was a disservice to their characters to not be able to have them like physically see each other in that
Yeah.
moment.
No, I think you're right. Like it's but here's the thing about it is that what we're talking about is what actually happened, but the way it was portrayed, we saw their faces.
Yeah,
And
we
so
did.
it's so it's, a sense it was like, oh, they can see each other's faces, but you're right. They couldn't at all, not even a little bit. They just saw helmets that looked like literally like everyone else.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like how do you even know you're talking to the right person?
I know. I was like, good on them for figuring out who was who. Cause sometimes in like the fight sequences, I was like, I don't know which one's Reese.
Well, I mean, Reese is fighting, and I'm thinking, what is it? Is that Adira? Like, when did she get into the fight? Like, is it or is like what's happening? It was kind of
Yeah.
hard to tell them apart.
I know. And then at one point I thought they did, like I thought Adira did get into the fight at one moment, but it was hard to tell because of like I wish there had been like something, I don't know, but they were blending in. So it's,
Well,
you
I
do
mean,
what you
they
gotta
could
do.
have did like they put a symbol, the science symbol,
Hmm.
on Burnham, which
Right.
we didn't really need, but it would have been that would have made a lot of sense to put them on Reese and Adira.
Yeah. Speaking of Adira, I did like the like first day of school drop off with Culber and Stamets in the hallway. I thought that was like cute, and like I liked seeing Culber and Stamets have that moment together. And again, I think we've talked about it all season. It does feel like sad and disappointing to me that we've really lost out on having more Stamets this season in like a more character developed way, because it's like so sad to see them go, like to see him go from being such a huge part of like the infrastructure of the cast early in the show, and then we've kind of like pulled back. And perhaps, and it's and I did want to caveat, like I do know that now Anthony Rapp is a parent, and so I don't know if it was schedule perhaps where there was just like less time available with him, but I miss him.
I'm gonna say this, and for the record, if you've been watching the pod from day one, you know I particularly am a very big Anthony Rapp fan. It's like that's my dude. So this is hard to say. I don't like what they did to his character this season. Um,
Yeah. It just
he,
feels very like whiny mommy in some ways.
yeah, and also like they've just like early on he had this swag, this like confidence, like a little bit commanding, like I know what I'm
Yeah.
doing. And this season, it's just been anything but. Because as much as I like the first day of school drop off, the end of the scene. So Rainer says, "You have Stamets. You have 2 minutes to figure out how to do this." And Cobra comes in and is like, "Hey, how you do it?" I'm like, "Yo, not the time. Like, this is
Mhm.
not the discussion. Like, no." And then he's explaining it, and he's all like, "Well, kinda. I think we could do like." I'm like, "Who is this dude?" Like that whole scene just
Yeah,
kind of was like, "What's happening here?"
it's strange, and it's like I could understand if they had tied it more to like if they're, I feel like I'm missing a piece. Like if this is where Stamets is now, then I need like what was the emotional journey to get to this point of
Mhm.
self-doubt? Because at this point, I don't know what the self where the self-doubt is coming from other than like, oh, we're not doing spore drives anymore, which to me would then like the Stamets that I feel like I knew would have been like either figuring out what is next, and maybe that's the questioning, and like I needed a little bit more setup there, or it's the driven nature to like figure out what is next, like
Mhm.
the overdrive of the the mad scientist vibes,
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
yeah.
It's the I've got it. Hold on just one second. I think I watch
Yeah.
this. Like watch me work. Like it's the like the
Yeah.
idea is that when you talk about the spore drive, when you talk about the propulsion of discovery, what you're looking for is you're looking for somebody who goes, "This is my domain. I
Mhm.
own this." Right? You want that Balana Torres, Geordie
Yeah.
LaForge,
That
Scotty
episode of when
type of
Torres is, like, on that shuttle that's, like, gonna blow them all up, and she's gotta, like, disarm the giant bomb, and she's in the tank. It's like the badassery. I need
yes,
the engineer badassery back.
yes, which is typically a Star Trek hallmark, right? Is
Yeah.
engineering badassery.
Which I feel like we've gotten like smart, like the funny smarmy engineer with Reno, but I need like a little, I don't know. It's been weird to watch because I love Anthony Rapp so much. And so I feel like I'm like, did something get cut that like I'm missing? I don't know. It feels a little uneven
Yeah,
for
and
me.
if you think back, I called my shot that I thought that what we're going to see is that he was going to invent something new. Like I thought that we were going to
Right.
see engineering badassery rear its head, and here we are. We've got one episode left, and I'm like, well, what's happening? Like I was expecting Stamets to just be the boss
I
this
know. I
season.
kind of wish they had sent Stamets with Adira, and then Stamets ends up going through the portal with Burnham, and then those
Mhm.
two together have to like fix it. I don't know. That would be it could be interesting. But I don't know because I don't know what happens next. So I could be like,
Right.
talking out my butt. But uh, I do want to reiterate. I think Reese is great. I'm excited. We've gotten more of him this season. I'm having a really fun time watching him take the captain seat and do these security roles. And again, it just makes me sad we're not going to get more Reese.
He did have a nice like hold my beer moment.
Yeah,
It was definitely
like
like,
I got
what do
this.
what are we gonna do? I got this. Here, hold my
Don't.
beer.
Whew,
It
we
was
got it.
great.
Super fun. I'm guessing it's so I think my theory of non being that extra Breen is not true anymore. Um yeah, I was like, "Oh, I think my theory is dead," but um I did want to talk about how many Breen red shirts go through the portal. I was like, it was like at first you're like, "Ooh, this is scary." And then it kind of got a little comical and like you're like, "Where are these guys
I was
going?"
ready for them just to go send me another, and at some point, somebody go, I'm not going in, and just get
Yeah.
pushed in.
Yeah, it felt like, yeah, very stormtrooper-esque in that way, I
Yes,
think, because 'cause they're all just,
yes.
like, the helmeted folks. There were a couple of interesting nods, I thought, to Star Wars in this
Mhm.
episode. It
Like
felt
the
very
marching and the yeah.
the
Go ahead.
marching, the going in through the, like, exhaust port essentially, like, to get in, which was a very fun, like, way to off, like, your heist mission. Um and then again, I thought there was some of those really funny, like, uh, comic beats with, like, everyone always picks on an ensign from Adira when they're, like, trying to find, the place to infiltrate the working deck. Um, Rainer and Tilly's, moment with the whole, like, "I picked you, no more of this emotional mushy gushy stuff. I don't need any more emotional encouragement."
Yeah.
Um, and then Book flirting with that Breen guard. Just I loved it. I thought it was
It
so
was
funny
hilarious.
and great, and I was like, even in all that Breen gear, that Breen, they see how hot Book is through that suit. Like, they get
I
it.
mean, it's what the only thing that was weird about that is like you're you're on a ship. You've been on this ship for a very long time, and somebody shows up who you don't know, and you're like, "Yeah, come on." What you like? When did you get here? Where are you from? Like, how come I haven't seen you before?
I don't know what their, like, visual reference cues for knowing who is who or whatever, but, it's interesting, like, how do they identify each other? That would be interesting to know. Uh, I did think Oh, I had a thought and now it just left my entire brain. Oh, I wanted to talk about Maul being in charge. And if I'm that like dude who took down the last like Breen in command, I'd probably be like, no, I'm actually in charge and you are safe until we bring your lover
Mhm.
boy back, and then we can figure this out. But it does feel very strange to have all of these Breen totally bowing down to this
Following
woman,
a
a
human that they
human.
don't even respect.
Yeah.
They do not respect the entirety of the race, right? Of the species. And yet, because she was married to, the scion,
Mhm.
like, you're just gonna, like, follow her? At
Yeah,
no
I mean
point in history has that ever happened in anything.
I mean, Elizabeth the Great, not Elizabeth the Great. Who am I thinking? Catherine the Great.
Who who had time established
Mhm.
as a strong leader in her own right,
Mhm.
right? She, Maul is a stranger to them.
Yeah, I feel like I needed to know more about culturally how the Breen view marriage, because if it is something that it's like, no, it doesn't, matter, or all of these other Breen just like really love Locke, like uh it's confusing to me because they so outnumber her. And like,
Mhm.
I guess if you just really want this tech and you think that that's like what it's going to take, I don't know. I would have appreciated like a side conversation of some Breen being like, why are we following this chick? And they're like, don't worry, we're going to like her off as soon as we get this tech. You know what I mean? Like something there.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think their focus is, let's bring back, if this technology will bring back the Scion, our true ruler,
Right.
then great. But so you want her involved,
Yeah.
right?
It just seems strange that she's like
She's sitting in the big
very,
chair.
very in
Come on.
charge. Yeah. Like calling all the shots.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a little bit like a head scratcher for me. Um, Again, I don't think I've been given enough, to your point, cultural understanding to for me to just buy into that wholesale.
yeah, I can't hear anything behind you, by the way. You're good. I Yeah, it's interesting. I did love, obviously our big like action set piece was Discovery flying into the shuttle bay of the Breen ship, and that looked great.
It did. I thought it was magnificent. I love space battles,
Some space pew pews. Yep.
and so you got the firing on the shuttle bay. One thing I do love about Maul is that she's smart.
Oh yeah.
She figures out what Discovery's doing right as they're doing it. There's no like, what are they doing? I'm not sure. It's like, she's like, they're
Oh,
gonna
they're here.
blow up
I know what's happening.
yep.
Yeah.
She knows exactly what's going on. She was like, got it. And that's when she goes, I'm going in. Like, that works. So I thought it was cool. I it turns out their plan was a little flawed because I didn't see a tractor beam. I didn't see something that they were like, it's gonna blow up and we're gonna put the tractor beam on it. But no tractor beam came out, and then it flew out into space, and
And then
I was like,
became a
you
portal.
missed? Yeah, it became a portal. I'm like, I think you missed. What happened there? So
Yeah, I don't know if it was like I was like, "Can it not be transported? Like, is it because of the material it's made out of? You can't just." Because I was like, "They nabbed up Book real fast." It seems
mhm.
like they got, everyone else out of there. So it just and like, why does it specifically need, uh I mean, I guess it needs the coordinates, like, they are all wearing their coordinates. I can see around it, but it did just feel like you just did all this and you still didn't, like, release the tractor beam. In time? I don't know. Very strange. I did really
Yeah.
enjoy, the failure is not an option Apollo 13 reference. I
Hmm.
was
That
like,
was a good one.
I see you space movies.
Let me ask you this: is there going to be a wedding?
There has to be,
Well,
or one
because
of them dies.
that's my thing. Like, will Saru die?
I don't want him to. I'm like, should I look at Doug Jones' IMDb to see if he was like
No,
really booked over
don't
the
ruin
next
it.
2 years?
Don't ruin it. It's 1 week. You can do it for 1 week.
I could
You
do it
can
for
hold
1
on.
week and not know. I don't know. It's like, it's a different Star Trek. We can lose people. We have lost people in the past.
I mean, it's setting up for him to die. Like the emotional tension is there. The long goodbye, the longing looks. Like I'm with Karen. Like I can't imagine them doing it, but I said that about Ned Stark in Game of Thrones, and I was dead wrong about that too. So
I feel like it's pretty tonally different shows, though.
yes, a little bit, just a little bit.
Just a smidgy. I hope there is a wedding. It'd be nice to like end everything. I mean, to me, that's the way you do that, like 6 feet under style ending where you get to see like a little bits of everyone's future at the end, and
Mm.
perhaps it's what they did in reshoots. Because I contend that that is the best final episode of television of a series to date that I can think of. Um,
I could see that. So here's how I could see the last part of the episode. There's a wedding. It's beautiful.
yeah.
And at the reception, in reds, they're making toast. And as you see them raise up a glass, we get a montage of what happens to them in the future.
Yeah. Like just little glimpses,
Mhm.
it'd be nice.
The only thing about doing that is you got to be careful in case you do want to do a Discovery movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I would love some Discovery movies if we're moving into that direction with like the Section 13 and the other announcements we've made. I don't hold my breath for theatrical release Star Trek movies anymore because we've been talking about it for so long. And they just announced like yet another one that's supposed to take place like way prior to any Star Trek we know. And it's like the first, it's supposed to be first contact, but not first contact, I guess. I was like, we've already done that movie. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to have a Discovery movie now, though,
It
right?
feels like it would be the only way to have, I think, some more satisfying ending to the
I
whole
mean, you
shebang.
do know who we're talking about, right? We're talking about Star Trek fans,
Yeah,
right? This
we
thing is
want.
gonna end next week, and they're gonna go insane,
Yeah,
right? Like, there's no way, based on what we've seen so far, there's no way you've been able to close this series in a way that is going to satisfy the hordes of vocal and picky Star Trek
mhm,
fans,
yeah,
right? There's no way. Like you can't. And the only way you're going to satisfy them is with a movie where you can allow them to close, come to peace with what happens to these characters. And so I think you have to have one at this point. Um
I
Otherwise
would.
your inbox is just going to be constantly filled with just annoyance. So give them what they
Yeah.
want. Give me what I
Um,
want.
Speaking of future things, they did just announce that for the Academy series, they've officially cast Holly Hunter as sort of our chancellor of the Academy, which I'm like, dope.
I can't wait. I don't know how I feel about that.
Holly Hunter?
No, I mean I love Holly Hunter.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how I feel about Holly Hunter's Chancellor of the Academy. That
I'm
is
excited. I just recently rewatched Broadcast News, and gosh, was she charming.
she's amazing, but like just I mean this feels very tonally different from
I
much
mean,
of what she's done.
yeah, I enjoyed her in like The Big Sick where she's playing like the mom character. I don't know. I've enjoyed almost everything I've seen her in, and I feel like she's going to look great in a uniform.
Yeah.
It feels
Should be.
very like like no frills, no, you know what I mean? That like Southern woman who's just like, you ain't got nothing on me, dude. Like,
Let
like
me let me
bless your heart and bring me to space.
let me be clear. I've been a Holly Hunter fan for decades. So my questioning her as chancellor of a Star Trek Academy is not saying that I don't think she's a phenomenal actress and I'm a fan. It's saying I haven't seen her really do sci-fi
Genre.
like this
Mm.
before. And so it's like, oh, I wonder what that looks like. Especially like she will have an accent that I feel like we've never heard in Star Trek.
I'm excited.
Yes. And
bring it.
she's a powerhouse too.
Mhm.
So it's not that I don't think she could do it. I'm curious about what this is going to look like.
Yeah. I also wonder if she's actually playing like human or if she's gonna uh you know, be anything else. We've got
I
lots of
can't.
options.
I mean, she's got such an iconic look. I can't imagine her with prosthetic ears or make. It's a great question. Now you got me
Yeah.
really fascinated.
I was like, I'll be interested. I'm very interested. Some other fun things of this episode. This was Jonathan Frakes' 31st Star Trek directing credit and his 8th time working on Discovery. It was the shortest episode of the season, coming in at 46 minutes or
Hmm,
47, almost 47. Um, I
it did
also
feel so.
I thought it was very interesting, this like uh it felt very intentional the way they've set up the Breen and some of the things when they say the Primarch to Hall leads the third flight of the Breen factions. I'm like, I see you with your being like, fascism's on the way. It's coming. Save this technology. um, yeah, it'll be interesting. Oh, and the Sarkess is the name of the Breen festival that you apparently bathe in oil baths for.
I mean, it sounds fascinating. Again, while oil sounds cool, uh, my ab work's not quite ready for oil bath. So maybe not this year, but maybe next year I'll be ready.
Yeah.
I've been hitting the gym hard, but not hard enough for the
I
oil
know.
bath.
And then I'm like, do they go into the oil baths in their like weird, like oozy state, or do they go solid? I got lots of questions about some Breen culture
I
things.
mean, yeah.
Like, is it more moisturizing to go in one way and come out another way? Like, do you absorb moisture that way?
I mean, the
Yeah.
question.
Is it a refrigerated oil bath? These are all valid questions about the oil baths.
I mean, in your glowy kind of state, do you need oil? Does it make you like extra glowy, right? Because
Yeah, is
I
it
don't
for
know.
like health properties or is it more just ritual? Like there's
Yeah.
lots of things we do for ritual.
Welcome
Anyway.
to the Wellness Podcast with Clyde and Myrriah.
I'm a big I'm a big fan of jojoba oil. That's my moisturizer of choice.
Hey, I'm old school. I straight
Uh,
with that cocoa butter.
you know, we all have our choices here on Star Trek Discover Your Wellness podcast.
Just say it. With our
Um
pod, you get a little bit of everything,
just
right?
a little bit from pancakes
Telling.
to moisturizers.
I'm just saying, if you need, like, you listen to us and we will talk to you
I'm
about the
sorry.
show.
Can't just said, I bet Mullen Locke had some oil baths and
Bet
I
you they
died.
did. But here on Star Trek Discovery Pod with Clyde and Myrriah, we're going to talk about Trek. We're going to break down the episode, and you will walk out here with a fantastic recipe for French toast and a new yoga practice every week. Stay tuned.
Ready to go. Ready to go. Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about in this episode?
Just that I'm excited for really next week and to see what happens. I enjoyed it. Um, what this episode told me, it really firm with me, is that I'm not ready for the series to end,
Yeah.
and that it hurts a little bit. But there, as much of the nits that I like to pick in this episode, there's some things I really liked. I did like the fact that no matter what happens, you did have a moment where Book and Burnham were actually able to clear up and say I'm sorry, and saying I'm
Yeah.
sorry is a big deal. And yeah, and Rayner, I like the fact that Rayner has come to a point where he feels comfortable sitting in the chair. Rayner's ultimately been a lot more respectful as a
Yeah.
captain who stepped into number one than I probably gave him full credit for. He really respects the chain of command, and I can dig that.
Yeah, and I thought on the Ready Room this week they had Jonathan Frakes in, and he talked about how the actor who plays Rayner, talked to him about like, tell me about the importance of the chair and why this is going to be such a big moment, because he's coming in having some, but not like our level of
Yeah.
Star Trek knowledge, right? And so he's like, I want to get this right. He's like, I know it's important, but I need to know why and how. And he said they had a really good conversation about it as he was like getting ready to do his seat. So
That's wonderful. He shouldn't have told anybody that. Like, that's not something you want to say, because that's that's a thing where if you say that around Star Trek fans, they will immediately know not one of us. You'll know about,
well,
like, that's
Frakes leaked it, not the actor who plays
okay.
Rayner.
Just say it. Like,
Frakes.
you gotta keep the, like, that's gonna mess up his I want to say street cred, but it's more like fleet cred. Oh, I'm gonna term that. That's I'm coining that.
Fleet
It's gonna
cred.
mess up his fleet cred. Like, you gotta like this, of all the things that we geek out about, the chair is like the thing,
I
right?
know. I mean, how much of a geek out did we have getting to sit in like a fully fake one at, at Comic-Con last year?
So you guys don't even know. Mariah and I at Comic-Con last year stood in the line, the longest line that we've stood in together, right?
Mhm.
And when you sat in the chair, it suddenly, for like, what was it, like 6
It,
seconds?
it's so short.
So
Enough time for them to take an unflattering picture of you and for you to get
yes,
out.
which is why you've never, no one's seen it,
Yeah.
right? Because we're not showing those
The
pictures.
angles were not good.
They were not good. I'm not, no one, no, I love you guys. You know that. You're our pods, you're our family, but you're not ever going to see that picture. Nope. But we did geek out about just being able to sit in the chair. Like, it was, so yeah, it's a big deal for us.
Yeah, it was cool. It's a cool
Yeah,
space.
that's it for me.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's a lot of things I really liked in this episode. It felt like it felt like a correct penultimate episode for a season, but not a series. And I think that's ultimately my biggest critique of it. But I agree with you. I felt like we moved forward in the emotional places I wanted to with our core cast, with Book, with Burnham, with Rayner, and then I'm so glad we have Saru and Tarina back on our screens. And yeah, come what may next week. It's gonna be a wild ride. That's
Awesome.
for sure. Um, Thank you all so much for joining us during the live stream. Thank you so much for listening. If you have been listening to this podcast, we so appreciate you. You can subscribe, rate, and review on Apple and on Spotify. Please leave us a review on Apple. It helps other people find the podcast. You can find links to everything and more at StarTrekPod.co, as well as a link to our Patreon. You can follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. I'm sorry I'm bad at posting on Instagram. I'm trying to get better. And we will see you all next week for the final episode of our
Cool.
namesake show. Until next time, y'all, live long and prosper. Bye-bye.